right, guys, we're doing a bonus interview this week. My friend and former colleague, David Pakman, is joining me today to talk about many things, but most notably his takedown of Reza Aslan this week, which was really just fantastic. Pakman, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, man. Well, you have had me on your show a bunch of times, and we go back and forth on email about a lot of topics, and we're talking about all this stuff all the time. So before we get into the Reza thing, for my audience that doesn't know who you are, can you just tell a little bit about your history and how you got into being a talker for a living?
Yeah, so back when I was in college at the University of Massachusetts, and then throughout when I was in graduate school as well in the Boston area, started a community radio hour. It was once every 2 weeks. Kind of liked doing it, even though I was horrible at it, so I just kind of kept going and eventually was able to get on a couple of additional radio stations. And then at a certain point, through some cameras in my studio, started a YouTube channel and just started offering the show to anybody who would take it. And to condense the last 8 years into 1 minute, we're now on DirecTV and Dish Network nightly. We're on 200 radio and television stations, and we have a YouTube channel that has about 4 million views every month, and it's a progressive political talk show.
Yeah, so what made you think that your opinions should be heard by other people? It's something I think about all the time, and when I watch a lot of these people on TV, I'm always like, well, why do you think you should be heard? What made you think that?
No, I didn't think that anybody should care about my views. That's why I was so hesitant to even do anything in the first place. But I was basically just offered, it was a brand new radio station which had an empty calendar, and someone came to me and said, they're giving shows to people merely for writing your name down on a form. And I thought, that's a low enough barrier to entry. I might as well try this, And even my mom, like my Jewish mother who loves everything I do, said my first show was okay. So that, like in Jewish mother talk, that's not that good,
That is just terrible. Jeez, that is rough. And yet here you are, and you were also part of the Young Turks, as I was. You were an affiliated channel with them. Now you're doing it on your own, and you've had a great amount of success, which I'm very happy for. So before we get into the Reza stuff, though, one other thing. So just give me your bona fides. So you are I was about to say regressive. You see what happens every time I say progressive now? Regressive wants to come out. You are not a regressive. You are a progressive through and through, right?
I think I am. I mean, if you look at my Twitter feed over the last 24 hours, clearly many people don't think so. But yes, I try to look at an issue and I say, okay, if I remove myself from the talking points of today and sort of analyze broadly where the progressive credentials or what the progressive values are here on this issue, I go in the direction that to me strikes me as progressive. Not everybody agrees, as you and I know.
Yeah, so there definitely has been this split. My audience knows about it well. There has been a split between what I consider classic liberals and the progressives, or as I now refer to them, the regressives. And I think you and I, over the course of the last year and a half or so, we sort of started seeing some of this stuff together, and we're talking about it for quite some time. And it's come from a series of different people, and now we can get to your Reza video. But I should say that when I started this show, one of the rules that I laid out is that I didn't want to talk about people, I wanted to talk about ideas. And I said, yeah, there's going to be some instances where I actually have to talk about people because sometimes they're going to interject themselves into the issues so intimately that we're going to have to actually talk about them. Reza Aslan happens to be one of these people, and you did a great 25-minute video where you researched and you thoroughly took point for point some of the things he's talking about, some of his credentials, things like that. Before we get too deep, let's take a look at the video you did on Reza.
Another reason that FGM is underrepresented in the Middle East is that researchers and organizations are often in fear of seeming bigoted, specifically Islamophobic, for hypothesizing or proving that there is a causal relationship between Islam and FGM. This is why people like Aslan can be dangerous. Not only is Aslan going around and saying that FGM has nothing to do with Islam, he helps to establish a sort of environment of political correctness among liberals and intellectuals, which goes to inhibit global research about these things in the first place. Aslan says, quote, "All of this is to say that while it is almost impossible to come up with some sort of connection that binds countries that have a female genital mutilation problem, it is clear that whatever that connection is, it's not religious." Aslan is very quick to come to the defense of injustices in the world, despite how little ground he may have to do so.
For the most part, it is not a free and open society for women in those states.
Well, it's not in Iran, it's not in Saudi Arabia, it certainly is in Indonesia and Malaysia, it certainly is in Bangladesh.
Bangladesh and Malaysia are, quote, free and open societies for women. Bangladesh is known for its Islamic vigilantism against women. And in Malaysia, Islamic Sharia courts notoriously treat women unfairly, not giving them full parental rights and not regarding their testimonies to be as trustworthy as men's. Malaysian courts require women to obey their husbands, and men are entitled to women's inheritance because it is mandated by Islamic scripture. And by the way, 93% of Muslim females in Indonesia are victims of female genital mutilation. Well, like you said, it's not about Reza Aslan as a person, right? I mean, Reza Aslan, I too was very taken with him in that interview he did with Fox News, with Lauren Green, which went viral now, I don't know, a year and a half or so ago, maybe longer, where he was asked, why do you know anything about this? I mean, he said, I am a scholar of religion, and I thought it was just fantastic. And as a person, I have no problem with the guy whatsoever. Over the last however many months it's been, I've started to inquire as to whether some of the claims he's been making on different media appearances are accurate, whether they're precise, because my concern is no matter which religion I'm talking about, no matter what the issue is, I really want to make sure that on the issues I'm being accurate and precise, and my investigation, my research turned up that that was not the case. I could not rely on what Reza Aslan had said.
Yeah, okay, so I want everybody, and I encourage everybody to watch the video. I tweeted it out a couple times yesterday. I'm gonna keep doing it. So without giving away the entire thing, can you lay out the basic stuff that you knocked out in the video?
Well, the sort of theme of the video is, let's take a look at some of the substance and some of the style when it comes to Reza Aslan as a supposed expert on the history of religion and on Islam, and just sort of see whether his claims stand up to scrutiny and whether we can find evidence that either corroborates or disputes what he said. One area we looked at is female genital mutilation. Another area we looked at was that of human shields being used by Hamas in Gaza. Those are two areas we looked at. We also looked more generally sort of at Reza Aslan's presentation of his credentials, as well as some of the ways that he sometimes criticizes those who disagree with him.
Right, so his credentials pretty much are made up, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're made up, although what I would say is the way in which he proactively presents himself as an academic historian of religion. A lot of the specific words he used are, to put it very lightly, taking a very general approach to his expertise, and as some would say, are outright deceptive. And as you look at that part of the video, I would encourage the audience not to focus so much on the importance of any individual credential or claim, but more generally on the idea that academics tend to shy away from constantly touting their degrees as the reason for their expertise. And I think that's the overarching concern.
Right, so not only does he talk about these degrees and things that he doesn't quite have, but he constantly is talking about them. He's constantly touting his credentials while at the same time minimizing the credentials of someone like Sam Harris.
Sure, and there were two responses with regard to credentials that were predominant on Twitter and on Facebook, et cetera, that were critical of me. One was, you cite Sam Harris, but Sam Harris also is not an expert in the history of religions. Sam Harris, to my knowledge, doesn't claim to be a historian of religion, so I took issue a little bit with that criticism. Mm-hmm. I also was critiqued because I don't have the credentials that Reza Aslan has, and that's true. My bachelor's degree is in economics and communication. My master's degree is in entrepreneurship and economics. My background is different, but I don't, number one, use my background as evidence for expertise in a particular subject, nor number two, was I claiming that my background was the reason for this video.
Right, so you're not debating him or even debating his ideas as if you're an expert in the history of religion or in history or anything like that. You are just fact-checking the basic claims that he was laying out, which actually that is what you're an expert in, right?
Yeah, I mean, what my focus is on using the resources we have available and pooling the resources of my staff to fact check claims made by individuals to see whether they stand up to any level of scrutiny.
Okay, so I would welcome everyone to check out the video. I not only welcome you, I think you should check it out. And I think it's a good segue for what has become this discussion about the regressive left. Because as you said, you are a progressive, and I almost called you a regressive because I'm getting the words confused these days. What do you make of this thing that has happened to the progressives? And we can either name names if you want, or we don't have to. It doesn't even matter to me at this point. But that this constant thing has come out of the left, where there's just one set of ideas that they're really afraid to critique. Everything else is on the table except this one set, and I think you know which set I'm talking about.
Yeah, and it's actually more sad for me than anything else, because I've had friendships with real people that I can't call them my friends anymore, not because I wouldn't like to, but because clearly they don't want anything to do with me because I've challenged some of their ideas. And
I hear you 100%. I 100% have that on my side as well. But we're friends now, so that's good.
It's more of a sad thing because I think that there would be so much more to gain from exploring areas in which the progressives are not always right. One of the problems that the Republican Party has is that you can have these drastically different ideas, often very wrong ideas, and they're sort of ignored, and the Republican Party and conservatives have become very compartmentalized. You've got the religious right, the pro-business conservative, the libertarians, etc. It would be great if on the left we could say, hold on a second, let's not allow what happened on the right to happen to us. Let's not have this split, whether it's a two-way split or a three-way split. Let's actually figure out what progressive values are and see what fits that criteria. Some people are willing to do that. And if you look at the like-dislike ratio on the Reza Aslan video, I think that's evidence that a lot of people are willing to do that, but not everybody is, and I think that that's a deficit for the progressive side.
Right, not only is it a deficit for the progressives, but it's a liberal idea to debate ideas, right? That's a liberal principle more than it's a conservative principle. So if you really want to debate ideas, then that's what you should be doing as a progressive. But time and again, and as you just said about losing some friends, and it's happened to me as well, I've seen that these people not only, but it's not just that they don't want to debate ideas, it's when they do debate ideas, they do what Reza does, which is lying about what their opponents say or their motives, and he's done plenty of that with Sam Harris. But then a series of these guys, and we can talk about Greenwald and the rest of them, that they don't mind twisting words of their opponents, and using very illiberal principles to defend what they think is liberalism.
And to be clear, there is a gray area here, and I'm one of the first people to criticize media outlets when they do the false balance thing. And as John Kerry once said, the idea that any random notion needs to be given the same amount of attention
Absolutely.
as what the facts support. Climate change is a perfect example of this. Experts, supposed experts. One of the experts believes humans have an impact on the climate. The other expert, supposed expert, thinks that there is no impact on the climate. Hey, it's 50-50. That's a false balance problem that we have in corporate media. So we have to sort of be discerning as nuanced progressives in figuring out where may we be falling into, let's give any crazy notion more attention than it deserves, to where are we shutting down debate when we would actually benefit from more exploration.
Right, and we know that, it's using terms like racist and bigot and homophobe and sexist and all of those things. Those are terms meant to shut down debate and take this moral high ground as opposed to actually furthering debate. And that's why, ironically, lately, I'm having an easier time sitting across, just today, a little bit before I'm talking to you, I sat across the table from Larry Elder, who is a staunch conservative. And I had an easier time talking to him than I would one of these regressives, because even if we didn't agree on everything, first off, that's completely fine, and that's the point of discourse, but I know he's not going to smear me after this. He's not going to take clips and edit them in such a way that'll make it sound like I said this or that, or he's not going to, send it to a press outlet that might misquote me, and yet these are all the tactics that these guys are using.
Yeah, I mean, I've not necessarily had the same easy time sitting across from conservatives as you're describing. I would love to hear more about how you're doing that.
Yeah.
But, I think the racism example is a good one because both sides are using that term in ways that I think are not good. The right has taken to saying to anyone that calls racism, they say, oh, you see race here, you're the racist. And that's a disaster, right? Because again, it shuts down debate in one particular way. The left, as we pointed out in the Reza Aslan clip, sometimes taken to, and this, when I say the left, I mean these elements within the left, not the predominant majority of the left, to saying, oh, it's racist to explore an issue in that way. And I think that that's just as much of a problem.
Yeah, and one of the things that I find interesting, and I mentioned this in an interview that I did with Gad Saad over on his channel, is that if you take the sum of the work that I've done, for example, and I think probably this will stand for you too, but correct me if I'm wrong, that if you take the sum of the interviews that I've done, the people that I've talked to, be it Maajid Nawaz or Sam Harris or Ayaan Hirsi Ali or Ali Rizvi or Sarah Haider, if you take the work and the conversations that we've had, these conversations, every single one of them, the through line here is that we want conversation. The through line is that we're trying to show you that there are differences between people and ideas, that not every Muslim person believes this, just as not every Christian person believes this, and doctrine, there's a difference between doctrine and actions and all that stuff. But if you look at what these regressives are doing, they are just conflating everything so that we can't have any real honest discussion.
I agree with you, and I would add the caveat that as responsible progressives, we should also be aware of how, hey, I'm just asking questions can be used to do some really bad stuff like, hey, listen, I'm just asking questions. Is Dave Rubin a child molester? It's just a question, right? I mean, I'm just asking questions.
No.
We've seen that used. We've seen that used in a way that is really bad. Now, I'm not accusing you of doing that. I don't think that I'm doing that. But we want to remember that I'm just asking questions has been misused by many people.
Yeah, and we see it misused. Not only do I see it on air, but I see it on Twitter and all the other places that you can do it. All right, so I think we've, do you have any final thoughts on regressive left before we move on to a couple other things?
No, I mean, I'm already starting to see a sort of blowback to the use of the term. And I thought initially when you and I spoke about it and some other individuals in the public used it, I thought it was really a great tool to sort of explain some of the problems that exist right now on the left. I feel like the blowback that the term is getting now, it's starting to make me want to look for new phraseology. And I don't know if I don't know if I'm being bullied into that, or if maybe there's a better, even more nuanced way then I can talk about some of these issues.
You know, it's interesting. I've seen a little bit of the blowback. And first off, look, you're going to get blowback from the people that it's identifying, right? They don't like the term, of course, because it has a negative connotation. So I remove them from this. I have seen people, people have tweeted at me or emailed me saying, are we overusing the phrase? Is it too much of a blanket phrase? I would say at this point, look, 4 months ago, barely anyone knew this phrase. It hadn't even, although Maajid Nawaz came up with it a couple years ago, it hadn't even been mentioned in the mainstream until about 2 months ago when Bill Maher mentioned it on his show. So I think part of the blowback is we as liberals, we don't want to sort of categorically blame everybody or blame like a whole group with a word, but sometimes you need a word. Like the reason this is taking off is because of the phrase, I think.
No, I think that's a fair point. And I think my focus lately has been to, instead of focus on regressive individuals, to try to point out particular anti-progressive ideas. Again, as you said it, to go back to what you said at the beginning, if we can focus on an idea rather than a person, I think we'll all be better off.
Yeah, and actually that really makes a good point, because your video, just to be clear, and you did say this, but to really be clear on this, you were attacking the ideas. You don't care about him personally in any way whatsoever. You're talking.
I have no reason to think that Reza Aslan is anything but one of the nicest people on this planet. Truly, I have no reason to think otherwise. Maybe you do. I don't know the guy. I have no idea whatsoever. I'm sure he's, to quote Donald Trump, a terrific guy.
Right, all right. Well, I don't know about that much. That might be a bridge too far for me, but I do see your point. You're attacking someone's ideas, not them personally, although I saw some people somewhat in the public sphere attacked, saying that you were attacking him personally. All right, so I know we could talk about the regressives probably till the cows come home, but let's move on to some other stuff. We both exist, I think, somewhere between online media and mainstream media. And I'm a firm believer that we have to make fun of, and we have to attack, and we have to ridicule and fact check mainstream media because it does not do it well on its own, right? And then at the same time, online media, which for a while was doing that really well, has now very obviously to me become the Wild West, where anyone's opinion is taken almost with the same degree of factualness as someone that actually researches their opinion, such as yourself. How do you navigate those waters? And do you see the online media becoming a danger in a way? Because I'm starting to think it's an actual danger now, too.
Well, I think anytime the barrier to entry to any particular medium is lowered, right? Now anybody with an internet connection and a webcam can have a YouTube channel where they do news and, quote, analysis. You open the door to having individuals that can present themselves as experts very easily without actually being that. At the same time, I feel like to the extent that the internet is a free market of ideas, with some exceptions, generally, the things that have some value rise to the top naturally. Now, the Alex Jones Show, hugely popular. It has risen to the top on YouTube, although it touts conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory. I would argue it still has significant merit. The production value, the entertainment value, the controversy that it creates. It's just not necessarily the same merit that some other program may have, you know? So yeah, I'm more worried about the average news consumer who has a full-time job, they're raising a family, they're not going out there discerning what is the deal with each particular source of media. They are more likely to sort of fall into the trap of equating who knows what Mr. Jim Bob conspiracy guy with a legitimate news program. You and I spend a lot of time on this stuff, so we've developed filters that are relatively effective, but a lot of people haven't because they're living their lives day to day.
Yeah, a lot of that also goes to the conflation between presenting facts and giving opinion, right? So we've seen this a lot. You know, cable news, even if you look at cable news 10 years ago, there was still more direct reporting. Here's the story, here's what we're gonna do. And then about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, it started becoming more and more opinion-based, and now it's gotten to the point where you really can't tell anymore if someone's either presenting a story factually or giving you their opinion.
And that's by design, right? I mean, because the best way to sneak the interests of others into a report is to blur the lines between opinion and what is fact. And we've seen this with the climate change industry. We've seen this happen on any number of issues. We've seen corporate influence get into what is increasingly difficult to decide, whether it's a news report or an opinion piece. And you know, sometimes I'll get emails from people and say, David, I love your show because you're so much less biased than Fox News. And while it's thrilling anytime somebody likes what I'm doing, somebody is fundamentally conflating what purports to be a news reporting channel, at least some hours of the day, and an opinion show. And that term bias doesn't apply in the same way to opinion shows and to news reporting.
Yeah, so how do you, as a guy that I know, you research your stuff? I think every time I've watched you on anything, whether I agree with you or not, and you do obviously give opinion after you've presented some facts, right? That's fair to say?
Absolutely. I do an opinion show. There's no doubt about it. I mean,
right.
I would say I don't do any original reporting, and to the extent that I comment on stories released by other media outlets.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's lost on a lot of the people. A lot of the people that just watch the online stuff, they don't realize that all these people that are just talking, and I include myself in this, we're just talking about other people's reporting. And there really is a difference between a reporter and a presenter that I think gets lost on a lot of people too.
No question about it. And so any opportunity I get to talk about media literacy, whether it's at college classes the way I do to young journalists, or whether it's on the program itself or wherever it is, I explain you need to understand types of programs. You need to really understand what it means to have bias. And you know, a really great example of this is when someone says, you're biased on a particular issue because of your membership in a particular group. Perfect example is I'm biased on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict because I am Jewish, okay? This is such a fundamentally anti-progressive idea because who would say, oh, gay people cannot be trusted on LGBT rights because they're gay?
Yeah.
That would be a crazy suggestion to any reasonable progressive. Yet with some issues, that's considered a legitimate critique.
Well, it's interesting because I always try to apply the same liberal principles to all of the things that I'm discussing. So for example, when there were these horrific attacks in Cologne in Germany on New Year's Day, and I saw a lot of people, you did a video about it actually, where you referenced something that I wrote, which was, I saw a lot of people suddenly saying, oh, the only reason that everyone's defending all these women is because actually they're going on their anti-Muslim crusade. And it's not only the height of absurdity, it's so dishonest. As I said in the thing, if 1,000 Jews had attacked these women, or 1,000 Ewoks had done it, or any other, anyone, literally anyone, I would have been defending the women. I'm not attacking a group of people, Muslims, I'm attacking the specific people that did this act. And this is another one of these places where people get very murky when they're trying to figure out what they believe.
Yeah, and it's just before we started this interview, I was looking at my Twitter feed, and someone who I thought was sort of a colleague said, it's despicable that I am framing those attacks, the New Year's Eve attacks you're referring to, as Muslim attacks. And this is the same person that cheers when I identify a Christian domestic terrorist as a Christian domestic terrorist. And I think we have to be consistent. If we believe that religion is a relevant lens through which people are taking actions, we have to be allowed to state the religion no matter what it is.
Right, so when certain people do things, they say that they're doing things in the name of religion. The Paris attackers released a statement right after saying we're doing this in the name of religion. I have people on the left saying, no, it's American foreign policy. And I'm going, guys, here's their statement. Whose word am I going to take for this?
And I think it's really important to piggyback on this. Just because we identify that the majority of domestic terrorism in the United States in 2015 was perpetrated by white Christian men, just because we identify that, or we identify that every report from Cologne and Stuttgart and Berlin and Kalmar in Sweden and Salzburg, Austria, just because all of those reports indicate that the perpetrators were Muslim men of North African or Middle Eastern descent, that doesn't mean we are saying, number one, that everybody falling into that category is capable of the same thing or is guilty of the same thing, nor are we even saying that that lens is the only relevant cause to discuss. We're not saying any of those things.
By the way, I don't think that, I know for a fact in the piece that I wrote, I don't even think I wrote the word Muslim in there. I just quoted the North African descent part, right? And I don't think you said that either. So it's where
I did use the term Muslim. I did use that term. Yeah, I mean, like you said, and again, to be very clear, I'm reporting based on what news reports say. I wasn't there, right? So I'm doing a report and an analysis based on news outlets reporting on these issues.
Right. I saw one channel, an online news thing, where they were covering this, and they immediately turned it into, well, the Catholic Church has rape problems, and we have all sort of a rape culture here in America, and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, this is the height of absurdity. First off, if as liberals, as progressives, whatever you want to call it, someone on the left, first off, you should be defending the innocent people, the women, should be your number one priority. But secondly, if it had been a group of neo-Nazis doing this, of course they would be attacking the neo-Nazis, not making it about us. So this is just one of those places where I think there's just such a disconnect in logic on the left, and I want to get that gap to be smaller because I still do consider myself on the left, as difficult as it's becoming.
Sure, and I think what the problem for me is, when you say, I'm committed to telling this story in a particular way because I think this is accurate, right? Once you commit to that, when people start questioning that presentation, you have committed to it rightly in your mind, so you have to stand by it and defend it because you believe that it's the right thing. This reinforces the idea that you have a particular interest in pushing a particular narrative, when the only reason you're forced to restate that narrative is because others are sort of pushing you on it, right?
Right.
So it creates this circle where now I have the option of either ignoring the critiques or addressing head-on whether my video about Reza Aslan is really an Islamophobic video. It's essentially a lose-lose for me.
Yeah. Well, I saw a guy who I'm not going to mention because I don't think he's even worth mentioning, but a guy that's on television sometimes, who's a public person, tweet at you something to the effect of, do you hate Reza? You could correct me if I butcher this quote, but it was something like, do you hate Reza because he's Muslim or because he's Iranian? And that literally had nothing to do with your video. And it's a tactic, by the way, that this specific person has used on me as well.
And then what's fascinating about that, when we think about the absurdity of these identity ideas of, are you biased because you're in the in-group or the out-group? Somebody responded, what I'd like to know is whether David is untrustworthy because he's American or white, to which, of course, I responded, interestingly enough, I'm Argentinian and Hispanic, right? So, I mean, it's the height of, and of course, I'm white Hispanic, much like our buddy George Zimmerman.
Right.
But the point is, what are we really going to gain by pointing out whether someone with a voice is within or outside of whatever arbitrary group you've determined is the relevant one?
Man, why do all the Argentinians I know look so white? You need to just tan a little bit and get some cred.
Argentina is 90% white. A lot of people don't know that.
That is a shame for you, I think. That is a shame for you. All right, so all of this stuff, we talk about the online media, we talk about the mainstream media. You now are, you're totally independent, right? So is there any level of anything you talk about that you clear with anyone? You just do your thing, right?
Absolutely. I mean, on a personal level, I will talk to people in my life and say, I'm thinking of touching this topic that I don't usually touch. I don't know what the repercussions are going to be. Help me talk through it and let me figure that out. But with regard to, should I not talk about an issue, or if I talk about it, take a particular point of view because of what the blowback would be? Absolutely not. And there's certainly no paymaster, as some would describe, influencing what I say. And the reality is sometimes I will cover an issue in a particular way, and some of my paid subscribers will cancel. And that's sad. That's a disappointment, because I would hope anyone who supports me because of generally what my program stands for rather than my view on a particular issue. But at the same time, I have to understand that if I'm going to always do the story the way I see it, people will get angry and I'm going to lose some financial support as a result of that.
Right, and I'm pretty sure that if you don't have anyone angry at you, you're actually doing nothing, right? You're adding literally nothing to the public debate one way or another.
If people are watching my show and having no reaction whatsoever one way or the other, what's the point of that program?
Yeah. By the way, I should note, I've said this before, but Aura, that produces my show, not only have they never given me any instruction on what to say, but the day that we started, I sat down with the guy that's in charge of operations, and he said, don't make the show you think we want you to make the show that you want to make. So I think it's worth mentioning that every now and again, because everyone thinks, oh, if you work here, you're controlled by this person, or even when you're independent, they might think you're getting funding from me. People love conspiracies on the internet, so I think it's worth mentioning every now and again.
Sure, and one of our most important broadcast partners is Free Speech TV on DirecTV and Dish Network, and there is a variety of views on so many issues on that network. Our views do not match up with the views of other shows on every issue. And as of today, we have never been approached by anybody at Free Speech TV saying, it would be better if you were in line with whoever else on that particular issue. And for that, I absolutely commend them.
Yeah. All right, I got one more for you, which is, how do you decide who you trust? Because over the last year and a half that we've become friends and when we've talked about some of this stuff, I think it's all sort of been couched around this idea that the media, online, offline, mainstream, off whatever, that it really is failing us at every level. And I find it very difficult to, even when I see articles, do I really trust this? If I see something, every now and again, FoxNews.com might come out with an article that isn't biased. But even then I'll think, can I really tweet this? What'll that make people think of me? And the same goes for something that I see on the left. Or we'll see something, Salon did something that was decent the other day, but I know that they're such trash in general, I didn't want to even give them a click. Like, it's such a mess. How do you decide who you actually trust at this point?
Well, there are a few media outlets, which I don't think it makes any sense to name, where we will not use that media outlet as a primary source for a story, either for political reasons or because they've been so wrong about something, etc. Other than that, I basically say, let's look at the facts presented, and then let's see what other sources we can find that back that up. So I guess my strategy generally is sort of take an average. If this is sort of the average of all the facts as being presented by a group of media outlets that generally I find to be trustworthy, that's what I go with. And I put very little trust in any particular media outlet on any one story.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I think you do great work and you care about what you're doing. I know that if you got something wrong that you would fact check it and you would have no problem acknowledging that you've made a mistake. So I welcome all of my viewers to check out your channel. Just put David Pakman Show up in the YouTube search bar. Is that where you want most people to watch you?
Yeah, youtube.com/The David Pakman Show is a good place to start.
All right, great. Well, we will continue this, and let me know when you're doing that sit down with Reza because I want to tune in.
It's an open invitation, like I've said. Haven't heard from him yet, though.
All right. Well, as David said, you can check out his YouTube channel. David, I thank you a lot. Now go do some work for God's sakes.
Thank you.